Hi, Facebook, YouTube. Great to have you here. My name's Tom Grieve. I'm a former state prosecutor and criminal defense attorney. I'm here with Steve and Mike from the training division. Hi, guys.
How's it going?
We're going to be taking some of your questions today. Before we get into that, I think you guys had a recent training event, right?
We did. We've had a number of them, as a matter of fact, Tom. So I actually was on the road in Sacramento, California, of all places, to administer a defensive shooting fundamentals certified instructor course. So we were out there for 2 or 3 days, and we had like 30 people out there, and we had an amazing time. Hot. I mean, very hot. Coming from Wisconsin, going to Sacramento was kind of a shock to the system, but nonetheless, the training went well.
You guys looking forward to any upcoming events?
Yeah. You know
Utah.
where we're going this weekend, right?
Utah.
Which part of Utah?
The big part.
St. George. Okay, we're going to St. George, Utah. Actually, we have a team that's heading to the airport right now. And they're going to be teaching a certified instructor course again, but this time it's going to be not defensive shooting fundamentals. It's going to be for our core curriculum, which is concealed carry and home defense fundamentals.
What are some of the highlights from that?
Highlights?
Highlights.
The highlights. The lessons that are in that, we start off with developing a personal and home protection plan. We follow that up with a module on handgun basics and then shooting fundamentals. The lesson that you probably like the most is it's got to deal with the legal ramifications of defensive shooting, right?
Essentially, it's taking someone all the way through the path of becoming an instructor.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Well, that's what we're doing out there too. But the curriculum itself, the core curriculum, is for anybody that's looking for an opportunity to be able to satisfy the requirements that their states and or counties have to apply for their permit or license to carry.
Gotcha.
So I mean, one of the cool lessons too is the physiological. I think I pronounced that right.
You got it. You nailed it.
The physiological and psychological effects of a violent encounter. What else is in there, Mike?
We do some gear, gadgets. That's always my favorite part.
We're going to get into some gear and gadgets soon.
I hope so, yeah. I mean, I was told I could come up with a question or something I could talk to you about, so I'm like, I'm definitely going to bring in my gun.
Crap.
Have you take a look and be like, all right, am I going to get myself into trouble here? Is this
Right.
something that's going to be, okay to be carrying around?
Right.
So.
I gotcha. And training, as we all know, and speaking to somebody who's defending these cases in court, can make all the difference. Not only from the sense of do you actually survive the incident, but can you survive the legal aftermath? I'm sure you guys, as professional trainers, you travel the nation, you're training people all the time. You see a lot of bad training, or you've heard of a lot of bad training. What are some examples of bad training that you've seen?
Just more so, a lot of it has to do with just the mindset of people. The whole, like shoot them and pull them inside, make sure that they're in your property, and just like the things that people like make up to like justify shooting someone. And it's just like crazy that they think that they actually get that past, a judge, jury, or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a bunch of well-intentioned people out there that just don't really think things through, from your perspective especially. So
I see a lot of it.
Yep, they grow up around guns, and a lot of them go into the military, and they have a mindset that nobody's going to take from me, especially my dignity, my life, those types of things. So they're going to defend it at all costs. We've all heard the saying, better to be judged by 12 than carried by 6. So a good concealed carry instructor isn't going to inform their classes that that's a good way to set their minds.
Yeah, we can aim hopefully a little bit higher than that, right? So, talk to me about some of the stuff. And by the way, before we go on, we'd like to welcome, we got Chris Ramos. Welcome, Chris. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Reload Rap. The Price is Right review. Gotta love that. Appreciate it. Thank you, Alan Ewing. Thanks for joining us. Jason, thank you for joining us. Appreciate it, guys. Guys, stick around. We're getting into lots of great content soon. Talk to me about the instructor platform. What are new and what's exciting going on over there?
Well, essentially, it's a platform that we've pulled together where all of our instructors can go, load in their classes, and then basically hold awesome classes.
Yeah, our hope and dream is to be able to, since we launched our instructor program 7 years ago, what we wanted to do is be the go-to source for people that are teaching, for instructors that are teaching concealed carry classes or defensive shooting classes, right? What's our goal? To give them the best support materials that we can possibly come up with for them, right? We know everything that we do is at a very high standard, high quality standard, and that quality not only is the visual presentation, but also the content itself. So we team up with people like yourself, Tom, the smart people in this world, that can tell us the right way to think and go about making sure that we are prepared to defend ourselves, right? So this platform now, what we want to do is be able to get all of those materials to the instructors. We want to be able to, when people go online and say, I want to take a concealed carry class, or I want to take take a defensive shooting class that, boom, they come right straight to the USCCA platform, right? So whether you're a student or an instructor or somebody that's looking to become an instructor, they get there and they can look at nationwide, where are these classes occurring? You know, and how do I get into this class? So this platform is designed not just to help people that are searching for a class.
For students.
Right. And instructors, okay, all of them, you know, help them find those classes, where they're being taught, process that intake, making them, collecting money and giving it to the instructors and getting all the information, what are the students supposed to bring to the class and how they prepare, you know, what time the class starts, all of that information, it's going to be bottled up inside of that platform.
It really takes away a lot of the administrative work that instructors have to do to put on classes.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And houses all the information in one place, like a one-stop shop for the student. So it allows them to get out and teach. That's one thing that we've been hearing for years, that, you know, it's hard for them to do the marketing and the bookkeeping, keeping track of students, and then like going back and connecting with those students that they've already taught.
Right.
And this just puts it all in one spot for them and really lets them get out and teach the classes. Because that's really what the instructors want to do, is teach.
It frees them from a lot of the administrative burdens and allows them to focus on what they got into this to do, which is to focus on helping people and saving lives, really.
Yep. Exactly.
Just, well, I'd like to welcome Jay Chatton, Eric, thanks for being a member. Jay Chatton, thank you for being an instructor. Ryan Westfeld, Harold, I think Norsk, Illinois. We said hi to Norsk, Illinois. And appreciate your service, sir. Thank you as well. Two Bears Bushcraft. Guys, thank you everybody for tuning in. Just kind of one of the last touching off points, or one of the last stepping off points here before we really dive into this is, I'm sure as instructors and as instructors for instructors as well, you guys see a lot of legal questions just pop up and so forth, right? Are there a couple or just one or two maybe that you just keep seeing? And what are folks asking? What are the thoughts that people coming into your courses thinking?
Yeah, a lot of them deal with what are the rules. What are the rules that they need to follow when they're teaching, they're instructors, right? When they're teaching the justifiable use of deadly force? How do you interpret those rules? You know, what are they, and how do you interpret those? What is a reasonable person? Those are the questions that we're getting in a lot of these cases.
Right.
So what we try to do is help them to give those answers. You know, it might be Mike asking me, it might be Max over here asking me, it could be Tommy behind the camera, but there's 3 different ways that those questions are being asked by 3 different people. So you got to be able to answer all of them so that they understand it.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Do you see anything else at your end?
Well, the reason actually I brought my gun in today for you to check out was because modifications seems to always come up in classes.
Let's dive right into it.
People are always doing modifications. So let me grab this quick. And just to show everybody, we did clear this out ahead of time, but if you want to go ahead and take a peek, so we're good. So this is my everyday carry, Glock 19. I have changed out the trigger and the barrel and then added a light onto it. So a lot of people say, well, you're making that into like a race gun, or it's like a killing machine, or and honestly, it's not. It's just really modifications to help me be a better shooter.
Right.
Really, that's what it is.
And for those who may not know, can you explain this red thing that we're seeing at the end of the barrel?
Oh, sure, yeah. So underneath here, this is a threaded barrel, so I shoot suppressed. So just take off the little cap, throw on the suppressor. That's all it is. But essentially, it just adds a little bit of length onto the barrel.
Why do you shoot suppressed, Mike?
Because I like my hearing. I don't want to end up like you.
What?
Hearing protection, what's that?
What else does that longer barrel do for you?
I mean, in my mind, I feel that it gives me a little bit better accuracy. I mean, it's a little bit longer barrel. It's going to like improve the ballistics maybe a little bit. That's the justification in my head.
Right.
I don't know. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm actually a big ballistics guy myself. As somebody with a hunting background, I certainly know the difference between, 2 firearms, maybe the same ammunition, but if we're talking some very different barrel lengths, we could be talking about very different downrange performance when we start talking about hitting soft targets as opposed to ringing steel or punching paper. This is where we start looking at subcompact. My old carry gun used to be my G43. Still use it on occasion. Fantastic weapon, but that's a short barrel.
Yep.
I was very excited when Glock announced that they were coming out with their G48. Lengthen that barrel up, expand the sight radius to really get that extra accuracy going. So that inch in the barrel, it may not sound like much, but that can actually change the ballistics quite a bit. Is this something you see come up in your classes at all, or what kind of modification questions do you typically see?
Well, the modification questions that we get into classes, if I do this to my gun, am I going to be, is the prosecutor going to have more ammunition to put me in jail?
Right, right. And so I get that question a lot as well, both as a former state prosecutor and also as a practicing criminal defense attorney. And every single time someone asks that, there's typically something that they have in mind, something very specific that they're looking at. And I kind of break up modifications into a few different categories. It's just the way that I look at it. And this is the way I explain it to folks when I've got a little bit more time, like what we have here, to those of you looking down the lens. We have kind of things that are just aesthetics, in other words, looks. How does this make it look, right?
Which is cool too.
Which can be cool, right?
I like red
nothing
and
against
black.
that. But we're always sending out some sort of message when we do that, right? If I have some sort of Punisher decal, that might make a great poster in my room, that might make this or that. Probably not something in the message I want to be sending to the prosecutor, the judge, the jury, law enforcement, everyone else, if I have
The mindset of that person carrying the gun.
because that's exactly how they're going to be using that in court. So when I start looking at the aesthetics, there are certainly some things that can immediately just cross certain, that's a no-go area, I don't want to go into that. When I start looking at some functionality issues, ultimately, to me, a concealed carry firearm, it needs to always work.
Yeah.
That's the number one priority for any kind of concealed carry firearm. So if I'm doing anything that could be, for instance, maybe too much lightning to a trigger, or really any lightning to a trigger can be very controversial depending upon who you're talking to. But if you're going to be really lightening up a trigger that could be affecting maybe the sear spring or anything like that, that could be affecting the primer strikes, which could be taking away from the reliability of that weapon to go bang every time I pull the trigger. I have concerns about that, not only from are you going to survive the shoot, but also are the prosecutors going to try to use that as a did you intend to shoot? If you've got a 1 pound hair trigger, you can run into some problems. Is that a common modification, or have you seen students in your classes try to come in and try to run that 1.5 gun trigger, pound trigger in their concealed carry?
No.
Typically not, no.
Good.
No, I mean, there's an awareness at least, and the instructors are doing a great job of making sure that people are aware of what could happen if that's the choice that they made. We put so much emphasis on safety in training and safety and employing the weapon in a self-defense scenario that people kind of understand it's not a good choice to go that light. Obviously, the gun's going to go bang if you just look at it. That's not a good choice, right? I mean, my personal opinions, I mean, I go to the gun store and I buy my gun, and that's the way that I use that gun.
Right.
You know, I know I have a good time with Mike on a regular basis because that's a pretty gun, and those are really cool things that you got on there.
Here we go. There's a reason why they put me between them guys, right?
But, you know, he puts a lot of money into that, too. I mean, right, those two little adjustments that you made in there, how much extra money was that?
That was like 20 bucks.
Yeah, right. Okay. So
I got a guy that knows a guy.
I got other things that I'm going to spend that money on, like ammunition and visits to the range and different training
right.
that I'm going to go to. But some guys make a lot of money, like Mike does. Mike's a very, very wealthy man, so he can afford to put these.
How many
guys
years have I
together
worked
like
with and for you, Steve?
So that's our friendly banter for the day. I won't pick on you anymore, Mike. But yeah, it's like I understand the function on that, and we do get not information, but challenges from some of the instructors on how should they answer these questions too, and we refer them to the curriculum because it spells it out quite clearly in the legal ramifications in our core curriculum. So why not point them there? You know, anybody that doesn't have that book, get it. Concealed Carry and Home Defense Fundamentals. You know, because that's something that you can take with you on a regular basis. You don't have to have Tom next to you all the time to tell you these things because it's written down. Although it is a good idea to have Tom.
Befriend a criminal defense attorney and then bring him around with you all the
So
time.
I'll show you right now. Tom's on speed dial, just so you know.
I am so screwed. But sometimes, modifications, one thing I will say, and look, I'm somebody who I have modified my firearm. I've changed some of the trigger components. I've changed some of the sighting components to help me out in low light. I'm not necessarily against it, but I do acknowledge one thing, which is the fact that keep in mind that there are going to be people on that jury, and if the prosecutor does it their way, it's going to be everyone, who do not really know squat about firearms. They are not going to be the men and women who are watching us right now, all right? Those are going to be the prosecutor's jurors. Those are the people they're going to be looking to keep on that jury. And, there's that old expression in politics that if you're defending or if you're explaining, you're losing. Now, obviously, we're going to have some time, if we're in some sort of jury trial, to be defending and explaining, but we also want to spend a lot of time prosecuting and attacking the state's case against you. Just understand that anytime you make modifications, you're using reloaded ammunition, which is something maybe we could talk about as well. If the prosecutor tries to make a fuss about it, you're creating an opportunity for them to pick at you. And I'm not saying that it's going to stick. I'm not saying it's going to win. I'm not saying anything like that. But we are going to be taking some time out of our narrative to explain, and that means we're defending. So obviously you need to make sure you survive the encounter. You need to make sure you're not doing any kind of silly modifications that could decrease your chances of surviving that encounter. But just understand that theoretically, to an informed prosecutor, those are things that you could be opening yourself up to. What about reloaded ammunition? Is that something you guys run into? Is that a question you run into?
I don't think it's something that really comes up that often. I think that's kind of scares away a lot of people,
Right.
just like going through the process of doing that. So I don't think I've really come across it very often myself.
We allow it in our class. Obviously, if somebody doesn't do a good job reloading, then you have some safety issues that we address going into the class, but we do allow it because it's a little bit more affordable for that person to be able to afford to train and shoot a lot, right? It does cost cut for them. As far as like their carry ammunition that they reloaded, we don't get a lot of questions on that, not a lot at all. But what we do is, in our training, Tom, and Mike can vouch to this too, is that we deal with not a lot of these types of questions, but more so in the decision making when it comes to, if you're involved in a confrontation, somebody confronts you and you are in fear of your life and you have no place to go. I mean, all those, the justifiable use of deadly force.
Right.
Check, all the way to the point where now you have made the decision to unholster and employ the firearm, when to shoot, when not to shoot. And
Right.
we train with the idea in mind. We put everybody into the situation when they go through our defensive shooting fundamentals classes. So it's not just we're getting rounds on target, it's making sure that when you're getting the rounds on target that you're doing it following those rules and guidelines that the law sets out for us, and being very conscious of the perceived penalty of a miss.
Gotcha.
So if you're,
'Cause that's very real.
yeah, it is. If you're pressing the trigger, you're not hitting what you're aiming at, you're hitting something.
Right.
And what is that, and now what kind of problems are those going to cause for you? So we do deal with that quite a bit in our classes.
And guys, as we are doing this, we are also taking your questions live. So if you have them, ask them. Let's do a live one right now. This one comes to us by Steve K. Steve asks, I carry a single stack. Do you suggest carrying an extra mag? Mike?
I would say, yeah, for sure.
Right.
Yeah, especially if it's a single stack. I mean, you don't really have a lot of rounds there. You're carrying maybe 7, 8-ish.
Yeah,
more or less.
48's 10. G48's 10, but yeah.
I would. I mean, I carry an extra magazine, and I'm carrying, anywhere between 15 and 17 rounds in the gun, depending on
Yeah.
what I'm carrying for the day. So,
Last thing you want to do is find yourself in a situation where you're out of ammunition.
Right.
Okay, so I mean, if it's the simple solution to that is to carry 1 or 2 extra magazines, why not?
Right.
We're already carrying a knife, we're already carrying a flashlight, why not carry a couple of extra magazines when you're doing the single stack, right?
Right, and again, speaking as a former state prosecutor and criminal defense attorney, we all see all sorts of horrific incidents in the news of end-of-liners, for lack of a better way of putting it, who seem to just be trying to commit suicide almost by their actions. But that's not the vast majority. These mass shootings are not really the biggest threat to people on a day-to-day basis, right? It's, I hate to say, your ordinary home invasion or armed robbery, but walking to the parking lot at night, that can be a big deal. And speaking again as a former state prosecutor and criminal defense attorney, those guys are working in teams, and sometimes it's 2 or 3 or even more guys. And if I have a single stack with maybe only a 6+1 in the chamber, I've got 7 rounds. That's only 7 solutions I may have at that point. Mm-hmm. And again, we're not trying to go all John Wick on this, but at the end of the day, if you shoot your magazine dry, because you're dealing with all sorts of attackers, that could be a big problem, which goes right back to your point, right?
Plus, we shoot till the threat ceases to exist.
Right.
Or not ceases to exist, but ceases to be a threat.
Right.
So a lot of times when we train people and when we train, we're pressing the trigger 3 to 6 times. That might be 1 magazine right there. And what's the idea and the goal, again, is to stop the threat. So sometimes with a handgun, especially a 9mm, anything of the smaller calibers like
Sure.
that, are going to take a little bit more to be able to stop that person that's coming at you, especially if they're jacked up on anything, right?
and magazines fail. You can have problems with your magazine as well.
Right.
You need to strip that out and get a new one in.
Right.
Right. TB asks from the YouTube live chat, is it legal to carry a backup gun? And if you do, or if you have to use it, would you be justified? What do you guys see as far as people carrying backup guns? And I can address some legalities as well.
I don't think we really get a lot of people on the range with backup guns just because they're coming out to the range. They've got, their kit, they're all ready to go. They've got their gear that they are using for the day on the range, not necessarily what they carry.
Right.
So, but I mean, I don't have any problem carrying extra guns.
It depends upon how serious people are. I know a lot of off-duty law enforcement will, because they're conditioned to carry two, they'll off the job or off the clock carry two. People that really take this responsibility seriously, they will not be unprepared. So they'll have extra magazines and they'll have a backup gun too. And it's good to hear from you, because I'm one of those backup gun guys.
Right.
So it's good to hear from you that that's not something that's going to get us in trouble if we ever find ourselves in that situation.
And again, speaking, as an attorney, look, if you're authorized by law to use deadly force to protect yourself, if you're in that actual self-defense encounter, it's not really going to matter according to law. At least I've never seen a law where it does matter, where it says that you can't use a backup weapon to defend yourself, whether that's a knife, whether that's, as long as it's legal, it's legal. So if you're telling me that someone's filed the serial number off that weapon, choose a different weapon for starters, because that might make it illegal. But otherwise, as long as there's nothing inherently illegal about that weapon, there should be nothing inherently illegal about using a backup concealed carry weapon. We have another question rolling in from Mark W. If you have time to call 911, should you not use deadly force, considering you had time to call, may have time to find an exit? I'm thinking if one is at home. Well, just right off the bat, Mark, if you are in a deadly force encounter, right, if somebody's broken into your home, so number one, we've got castle doctrine issues that may or may not be in play. Are there any kind of duty to retreat options? And keep in mind, and for the folks who may not be familiar with these terms, very briefly, generally speaking, in the states, in any given state or jurisdiction, if you are authorized to use deadly force, then generally speaking, you have to be facing some sort of deadly threat. And there's a test that's going to be dependent upon what state you're in as to when and how to test whether or not you're facing that deadly threat. And if you're facing a deadly threat, now I can use deadly defense. What castle doctrine generally does is it presumes that if certain conditions are met, someone's broken into your home, right? Someone maybe have broken into your business, your automobile, where you are located, right? Again, all these vary by state. But if certain conditions are met, then maybe there's a presumption under the law that I'm facing that deadly force. So I would suggest from the legal end that if you're in a deadly threat scenario, if I'm in a situation where I can use that firearm in self-defense, I'm not saying that I should always use it if there's another option, because a firearm should really always be an option, a last resort. But I don't know if necessarily I'm going to allow myself to get shot while I'm calling 911. What do you guys think?
I completely agree. I don't think I'm going to be... Stop attacking me for just a second. Let me get on the phone.
You're right.
And then I'm going to protect myself. I mean...
Well, here's what we teach. Okay, so in a home defense scenario, somebody is breaking into your home. We tell people you need to evade, okay? Do your best to get out of that room and go where? Someplace that you've staged your defensive firearms, right?
Right.
So evade, barricade, arm. Get that weapon set up and ready to use as quickly as possible. Then communicate to who? 911. Okay, if there's anybody in the house, you're doing that as you're doing the evade, you know, and then you're doing it again once you have barricaded and armed. Okay, so you evade, you barricade, you arm, you communicate, and then, if you have to, you respond.
Right.
Okay, so I mean, those are the 5 things that we teach in our defense shooting fundamentals class, right?
Right.
And we practice it, and we put together a simulation. We get people to experience it without actually having to go through a real-life deadly encounter. And you should see how people get jacked up about this. The heart
Right.
rates go up through the ceiling. Mistakes are made. And you know why the mistakes are made?
Because you're standing next to them yelling,
Well,
scaring the crap out of them.
That helps. That helps.
It makes it a little more realistic.
providing some stress, right, to this person. But the reason that they make mistakes is because they've never done it before. They haven't practiced it. They haven't thought about it. So they finally made the decision to go and take a class, okay, and they found a good instructor and
Right.
a good program, and they get in and safely can be able to practice and have that experience. Now, if something were to happen, that's part of their home defense plan, and they know how to be able to do what they need to do to survive that attack.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, look, I said that it creates a presumption. Anytime you hear that P word, presumption, there's another R word that usually follows it in the law, and that's rebuttable. In other words, look, anytime that you may be able to raise the fact that you're in reasonable fear of imminent death or great bodily harm, or anytime maybe castle doctrine gives you the presumption that you're in reasonable fear of imminent death or great bodily harm, those are the standards here in Wisconsin. Check out uscca.com/laws in order to learn what the standards might be in your state, to take a look at the nationwide map. But you got to remember that okay, someone is breaking into my house, but maybe there's some sort of issue that makes it so the prosecutor can try to introduce evidence to try to usurp that presumption. So I no longer have the presumption. So automatically leaping to that deadly force as your option of first resort rather than last resort, that can cause some major problems. And that just goes back to why you're training to that standard of, look, it's a last resort option.
If you have a firearm in your house, if you carry a firearm with you on a daily basis and you don't get training, you're not being the smartest version of yourself. Okay? I mean, I'm going to go on record and say this, be smart. It's a smart choice to have something, the equalizer. It's smart to have that, but it's foolish not to be trained to use it correctly.
Right.
So somebody has a question there about low light training. Do we do low light training? So do we do it? Yeah, I've had low light training. Do we have that as part of our curriculum right now? No, but it's on our vision, what do we call it, of ETO? So it's part of what we're going to be developing. Mike's in charge of that. So it's part of what we'll be developing inside of the next year. It's important to be able to have low light training curriculum to offer our instructors, because how many of these violent encounters happen in broad daylight?
Right.
Some, but not most, right? Most of them happen in low light situations. So if you haven't had that experience, what's the saying? If your mind hasn't been or your body hasn't been where we want it to be, how does it work? Then you're not going to be able to do
Mind can't go, or the body can't go where the mind hasn't been.
yeah,
right?
so you got to think about it, but you also have to do it. You need to get out there and practice this type of stuff, right? We did it at Gunsight. What was it? We were there last year or 2 years ago. I can't remember. But
And it's fun.
It's fun.
I mean, anytime shooting
There's
is
that.
fun, right?
Yeah. It depends upon who's standing next to you, to your left and your right, though, too. But the guys at Gunsight did a great job of conducting a safe range, and that training was invaluable. How do you know how you're going to carry that flashlight? You're going to carry it here. You're going to carry it here. Mike has a flashlight in his firearm. Did you use that down at Gunsight?
No. These are all new additions that I've made recently, so I'm looking forward to getting out and playing with it more, though, for sure.
Training.
Obviously, yes.
We got another question from J Mar. Do I really need to get a concealed carry license if my state is open carry? Are you going to be concealed carrying, or are you going to be open carrying? I mean, frankly, just speaking not as an attorney, but just as a guy who's into firearms, I would, at a minimum, want to have the option to do either. There may be times and situations where you want, even if you're an open carrier, maybe you would prefer to conceal carry under whatever particular set of situations might be. I would want to have that option. I don't know why you wouldn't want to have as many options, as many tools as possible.
Agreed.
I agree.
Moving on. All right. Randall A. Louisiana's open carry. Well, here we go. I take advantage of this law. Do you believe I could find myself in more of harm's way? Well, that's a can of worms.
It's situational.
I would say yes.
Right.
I mean, just the fact that, and this is my own personal thing, I don't open carry just because I do not want to be the first person that's going to be targeted in a situation. That's how I feel about it, that it automatically makes it a little more dangerous for me walking around.
It's a tactical advantage to have it concealed. If people don't know that you are somebody that could respond to their attack, they're not going to pay that much attention to you, right? So that gives you a little bit of an advantage. Maybe it's a couple of seconds, maybe it's just a second, but nonetheless, it's an advantage. Right. So if you have it on the open, who's the first person? Tommy, you're a bad guy right now, and you see me open carrying. You coming for me first, or are you going to go for these guys that don't have anything? Yeah, Tommy says he's coming for me.
No, I do
And
open
he's
carry.
smiling too. You can't
at
see
home.
that, guys, but he's smiling.
So I live out in the country, a little bit of land, and I do open carry when I'm at home because it's just more comfortable.
And I open carry on land too.
But I mean, it's just me, kids, family, whatever. It's not like I'm out mingling around,
Right.
people at McDonald's or whatever. But
Right.
so
Yeah, I know that can also create issues. And my position is I'm reasonably agnostic, which is to say that I think it's entirely situational, and I think it's going to be entirely dependent upon your own training, your own preferences, who are you with. But, again, as a prosecutor, I remember that there were incidents that maybe law enforcement could have handled it better, but they got the call of man with a gun. And that can create danger to oneself. And again, I'm not criticizing the individuals who are doing that. And we're not doing that one bit, all right? There's a reason why we have the Second Amendment. But certainly, just stepping back and putting the politics to a side, there can be some issues. But, at the end of the day, you need to do whatever's comfortable for you, but I would want as many options on my tool belt as possible. We've got Andrew E. What are your thoughts on carrying law enforcement ammunition for self-defense?
I carry jacketed hollow points. I go through multiple manufacturers and the products that they offer because of my job. My job is to be able to answer questions like that. And which one do I favor? I'll be honest with you. I mean, the one that my gun uses effectively on a regular basis, and there's a handful of those that are out there that I've had personal experiences with. So as far as like carrying ammunition that law enforcement uses, I don't know if the law enforcement in our community is using jacketed hollow points. I'm not sure what they're using. It's a good question to ask them, though.
And I see this question, and I think probably where Andrew's coming from on it is, if a prosecutor tries to get on your case in court about, well, you were using this particular type of ammunition, that makes you some sort of menace to society, at least you or your attorney always have that back option, that back pocket option of pulling out and saying, excuse me, I'm using the same ammunition to defend myself, my loved ones, my family, as that deputy in court over there is using to protect themselves when they're in the line of duty.
Yeah, if that's what the question
Right,
was.
that's what the question's presuming the knowledge of.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, I mean, that's smart.
It's smart, but keep in mind, going back to exactly what Steve was saying, just because it works in that deputy's gun, that patrolman's gun, that officer's gun, doesn't mean it's going to work right in your firearm. Don't assume. You've got to test. The magazines as well, just like what we were talking about.
Yeah, different
before.
guns like to eat different ammo, for sure. I've had guns that will not run certain ammo.
How many people do we know that when they go to the range, they are FMJ only? Okay, and they don't practice ever with the ammo they carry
Right.
every day. They're just out there using something completely different. Again, you might want to work that into your training routine. Put together some drills and use the ammo that you carry every day.
And guys, again, kind of speaking as that voice from the trenches of the justice system, from court, let me tell you, this is a little bit of a damned if you do, damned if you don't. What am I talking about? Well, I have been in court, not for my clients, but just sitting there in court when I've been listening to cases, waiting for mine to be called, when Full Metal Jacket has been classified as military-grade ammunition that no civilian should be able to use. These are what judges and prosecutors have made claims. I've been in court when, by contrast, all jacketed ammo, all hollow points and so forth, has been referred to as cop killer bullets, okay? Trust me, at a certain level, there's no winning with some of these people, okay? But exactly what Steve was saying, I entirely agree. You gotta practice how you're going to be actually defending yourself. So why would you use necessarily different tools? I get it, costs a lot more. Oftentimes it's $1 a bullet or more. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be using it. And firing it one-handed, offhand, you name it.
Yeah, we have the plausibility principle that we put into our curriculum, and basically what that is off of empirical data that's been collected over 20, 30 years. It says to you, this is more than likely the situation you'll find yourself in if you have to employ your firearm to defend yourself. So therefore, your training should match what it is that's plausible, right? So if 80% of defensive shootings occur between 9 to 15 feet, your training and all your shooting should be between 9 and 15 feet. What's the percentage of shootings that happen when you're moving from point A to point B? Those plausibility principles are the things that you should be, putting into your training routine. Don't just show up at the range and start shooting.
Stand still, perfect stance,
Right.
perfect grip, perfect
lighting,
alignment. Everything is
yeah.
perfect, because that's
Yep.
never going to happen.
Yeah, use the ammo that you're going to use the firearm that you're going to use a target that simulates the target that you
Right.
might be shooting at. Do as much as you possibly can to get as much realism as you can in that training that you have.
Guys, I think we have time for one more question, so let's check it out. So Patriot in the Dark asks, can you go over the 3 points that must be covered under a justified self-defense situation? You guys follow the 3 points?
Yeah. Do you truly believe, would a reasonable person truly believe that you are in danger of losing your life or limb, or that of a loved one, right?
Right.
That's
Great
one.
bodily harm.
Great bodily harm.
Right, yeah.
Next.
You can't put me on the spot like that, Steve.
Did you have the option to retreat?
Okay.
Okay. Is the force that you choose to use, how's it worded legally? Is it more than you needed to stop the threat? So in other words, I'm kind of a big guy, and if I'm coming at Mike, I don't have a gun, but because I'm coming at Mike, maybe I have a knife. Want to see my knife?
And I know who you are, Steve.
I have a knife. This is a knife.
And they put me next to him,
Would this knife be scary enough for Mike to be?
My insurance rates are spiking. I can just feel it.
But the question is really, it could, somebody that had, I'm 275 pounds.
Disparity of force.
What do you wear?
What do I
What do
weigh?
you
185.
So if I'm charging at Mike, he's probably going to be justified in employing his firearm on me, correct?
There's going to be an argument for that at a minimum, but trust me, and I get asked this question all the time. Guys, prosecutors are going to charge whatever they feel like charging. It's kind of like asking, can I be sued for this? My answer is like, well, You can be sued for anything. That's not the question. The question is, are you going to prevail in court? And when we start getting into questions like this, it's going to be looking at the unique laws in that particular state, looking at the background of the parties, looking at the exact circumstances. I hate to use the cliche that every case is a snowflake, but kinda, it's a fingerprint. How about that? It's a fingerprint, so it's a little bit different. But I can definitely see the argument as to why there's gonna be the disparity of force. You came out with a knife, you could definitely use a knife back. I think that if you came out with a knife, he uses a knife in defense, yeah, to me it's very clean cut. You present a deadly force, he presented a deadly force to protect himself, absolutely. Then it gets a little bit more nebulous if you don't come at him with a knife, you just come out with your bare hands. Now these might be, yeah, those are probably deadly weapons.
I'm justified to use anything I got, Steve, if you're coming at me.
He's looking for a reason. Isn't there one more thing that they have to satisfy too, that it wasn't escalated? So if I get out there and I Mike's mic'd up, so I won't.
You can't touch me.
I won't
You
touch
can't
his
touch me.
mic. But if I were to push him and he pushed me back, that escalation now.
If it's mutual, so for instance, let's go back to that scenario. You pull the knife and you charge Mike, right? He pulls out a knife back. You start running away. If he chases you down and starts knifing you in the back, that's a homicide.
That's on
right?
me, yeah.
Right, because if you basically continued the engagement, or someone, even if the bad guy retreated, and you chased him down in your yard, wherever it might be, you're gonna be in a rough spot when it comes to court.
Yeah, I mean, these things they're dynamic, and things are happening so fast, and I think it's important, if you can do one favor to our audience, for all those Facebookers and YouTubers out there, and you can sum this up for them, the justifiable use of force. Could you finish with that?
You're asking an attorney to say something briefly and succinctly?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Right, Max, is that what I'm supposed to do?
Yep.
Thank you very much.
If you're facing a deadly threat, you can't retreat, you can use deadly force. That's I think, as short and sweet as it gets. This is the point where if this is like one of those medical ads and there's a 3/4 of the page or like little fine print, check your local listings. The different laws vary with place and time. Every case is gonna be different. But generally speaking, if you're facing deadly threat and you can't escape, then generally speaking, you can use deadly force. I think that's a fair way of putting it.
That's a great way of putting it.
So appreciate, guys, thank you for checking us out on Facebook, on YouTube. Really appreciate seeing you, all of you. I saw a lot of names scrolling, a lot of familiar names in some cases, scrolling across the screen as I kept glancing over at what was going on our off-camera screen. It was great to see a lot of familiar names and faces coming back. Guys, hopefully we'll see you around at the next time. I'd like to thank everybody here for coming in. Had fun as usual. We'll see if I survive the next 10 minutes. We'll see you around next time, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.